I'm Mark Golub, and in the news is a remarkable study done by the Anti-Defamation League. It's produced an exhaustive, unprecedented study of global anti-Semitism today. The ADL polled people in more than 100 countries, more than 50,000 adults, to produce definitive results of the extent to which anti-Semitism is a living presence in this world. The ADL survey results were made public today at ADL offices in New York City. And of course, Shalom TV covered that event, and we'll have it for you in its entirety in the coming days. But at the event, the National Director of the ADL, Abe Foxman, summarized the survey's troubling findings this way.
After conducting this public opinion research in over 100 countries around the world, in places as diverse as Cameroon, Guatemala, South Korea, in predominantly Muslim countries and in predominantly Hindu countries, in places with Jews and others without Jews, in the developed world and in the developing world, one thing sadly is true. Beliefs in anti-Semitic stereotypes are prevalent in society almost everywhere. While there may be very little in common between many of the countries surveyed, data clearly indicates that classic anti-Semitic canards define national, regional, religious, economic, and cultural boundaries.
Abe Foxman at today's news conference. Well, to discuss the significance of some of the more striking aspects of this, again, unprecedented worldwide study of anti-Semitism, we're so pleased to be joined now on our phones by the National Director of the ADL, Abe Foxman. Abe, first of all, thank you so much for joining us, and congratulations to you and everyone at the ADL for documenting the reality of anti-Semitism throughout the world.
I accept the congratulations. I wish it wasn't necessary.
Exactly. Abe, what's the most significant finding to come out of this study as far as you're concerned? A study that, again, shows the virulent presence still of anti-Semitic attitudes worldwide. What's the most significant thing to you?
Well, in the quote that you played, I think the most significant thing is how persistent it is, how widespread it is. That it doesn't matter what country, it doesn't matter what region, it doesn't matter. More than one out of four adults are infected with serious anti-Semitism. So the very fact that 70 years after the Shoah, after the Holocaust, it's one out of four is very distressing, very disturbing, very sobering. I wish I could say shocking. I wish it was shocking, but we know it's there. I think we didn't really realize how deep it is, how broad it is, and how it plays, as I said, across national, regional, religious, economic, cultural boundaries.
Yes. You know, Abe, one of the things that just jumps out at me is that, as you say, anti-Semitism is virulent even in countries where there are no Jews. What do you make of that?
Well, we've known that even when you ask the question, if you know Jews, right? 75% of the world have never met a Jew, and yet 26% of them
yes.
Are anti-Semitic. And those who are anti-Semitic, 70% of them never met a Jew. So it really doesn't matter. Look, to some, we know historically, to some Jews are too capitalist or too communist, too right-wing or too left-wing, too rich or too poor, too believing in God or too atheist. It really doesn't matter. And we see it here, that it doesn't, we did this in 98 languages. 98 languages. So despite the cultures, despite the religions, despite the economic conditions or stability or instability, it's there. It's a presence. It's not a historical fact. It's a current event, and that's very distressing.
By the way, I want everybody to know that you can go online and see this, the details of the study. You'll be able to see it, I'm sure, in Jewish newspapers. We'll be covering it on Shalom TV consistently. Many people are going to be analyzing what these results mean. And the study did a fabulous job of laying it out so that it's done by country by country. There's this wonderful, this page that breaks it up by country, and then an index score of how much anti-Semitism is present. What are the major claims of people who are anti-Semitic that charge the Jews with certain kind of stereotypes that many of us thought would now be long gone? Abe, it seems to me that as I read your study, one positive is that the United States has a very low, it may be the lowest index of anti-Semitism, only 9%. Am I correct that the United States comes out at the very, very bottom?
There are lower. Some of the Scandinavian countries are lower. I think what we find is in the English-speaking world, that is the United States, Canada, United Kingdom, it's low. It's, 8, 9, 15%. So what we're finding is in English-speaking countries, it's low. We're also finding in Scandinavian countries that it's low. But there are aberrations. So in Scandinavia, for example, where it's very low, the level of anti-Israel criticism, prejudice is very, very high. In the former, in Eastern Europe or former Soviet Union countries where there's positive attitude towards Israel, anti-Semitism is still high. So there are a lot of aberrations, and it's difficult to find almost universal agreement as to why. But there is something, he asked me, what do I find troubling? Besides the entirety, I find troubling that the most widely accepted stereotypes
Yes.
in 2014 across the world is the question of loyalty, Jewish loyalty and Jewish trust. 41% of the adult world that we, of the 102 countries that we polled, believe that Jews are more loyal to Israel than whatever country it is. That's almost 1 out of 2 do not trust Jewish loyalty. And the second is that Jews have too much power in the business world, and that's at 35%. These are serious political anti-Semitic stereotypes. The Jewish people have paid a heavy price for nations and people and beliefs who didn't believe the Jews were good citizens of their country, of their principality, etc. So while social acceptance of Jews globally, I would say, is much better than it's ever been before, the fact that these stereotypes of political anti-Semitism are so high is troubling, and I would even say dangerous. And I would say, like, even in the United States, where the level is low, the issue of are Jews more loyal to Israel or the United States has until recently been about 30%. The last poll we took in the U.S., it went down to 24%, which even in the U.S., 1 out of 4 Americans question the loyalty of American Jews. That, to me, is very, very serious.
One of the things that I'm wondering is the extent to which your study will provoke and evoke a certain kind of response within the Jewish world. A, to kind of analyze what these studies suggest people are feeling about Jews and why. And second, Abe, will there be, in your mind, strategies that will come out of your study for how Jews proceed? So, for example, when you talk about the extent to which there's this sense that Jews are often more loyal to Israel and the Jewish people than they are to the country of their residence, there seems to be a need for the Jewish community to address that in some proactive way. To what extent do you believe there will be responses generated as a result of your study?
Look, we hope, hoping that that the survey will generate conversations.
Yes.
Now, you say in the Jewish community, yes, we continuously discuss such issues. I would like to believe and hope that it will generate conversations among government, scholars, NGOs around the world, to probe again why, wherefore are these attitudes, and to begin building countermeasures. Now, we know education is the answer. However, while education is a predictor in the Western world, we find in the Middle East and North Africa, the higher the level of education, the higher the level of anti-Semitism.
Which is fascinating, isn't it,
Now,
Abe?
so even the antidote that we have is bizarre. So here, the more they study, the more they read, the more they know, the more they're educated, the more they watch television, the more they're anti-Semitic, which tells us to look as to where they get their information about Jews. Mm-hmm. We're finding, part of the poll indicates, that most people today get their information from television and internet. And so in those countries where the television and internet is government-controlled, government-spun, and anti-Semitism is part of the political expediency of the ruling class, the more openness there causes or brings about anti-Semitism.
Yes.
But we've already had one response. Greece is high.
Greece is very high,
69%. There are two countries that are somewhat, surprising. One is South Korea. South Korea is high. Why? We don't know. We need to probe it. Greece is high. Greece is, except for Middle East, North Africa, it's the highest in Europe.
Yes.
Why? We can only speculate that economic instability. There's been a lot of coverage about Jews and economics and the Golden Dawn. And it wasn't until recently where the government, the Prime Minister and his Minister of Interior, they passed legislation to outlaw the Golden Dawn. This is an anti-Semitic, super nationalist party as an effort to begin to undo the poisoning. So I'm saying the good news is I heard from the Prime Minister's office of Greece saying they're concerned and they want to meet and engage and discuss what else needs to be done. So while the Jewish community, I think from a scholarly level, it's interesting for us to know, where, what, how. The important response is from governments, from non-Jewish bodies, to see how we can join with them to fight it. I want to add one more element.
Please.
We found, which was, interestingly enough, region, the geographic location, tends to be a very strong factor, the strongest factor in many cases, even stronger than religion. So depending what region you come from, that means its culture, its environment, its political environment are more determinants of anti-Semitism. However, amongst all religions, Muslim, members of the Muslim faith have a very high level of, are you there?
Yes, I'm right here.
Have a very high level of anti-Semitism. So the Muslim world, and Muslims are 49% on the high on the index level, almost twice as much as Christians, which is irony of irony. Historically, the threat to Jewish people came from the Christian world. Mm-hmm. Today, the Protestant world, if you take a look at our polls, the lowest anti-Semitic index levels are in the Protestant world. Mm-hmm. And the Catholic world has turned around. And so today, the greatest level of anti-Semitism is in countries where the majority are Muslim.
Yes, but we should point out, this does not surprise me. I don't think it'll surprise anyone. The highest level, I believe, as I read the study, the highest index level of anti-Semitism is on the West Bank and Gaza at 93%. And then in some of the other Arab countries, Egypt, Yemen, Morocco, etc., it's very, very high. And
And
Evidently.
it's even high with countries that have peace with Israel, very high, because the leadership, either in Egypt or in Jordan, who are at peace with Israel,
Yes.
have educated against anti-Semitism. They've made peace, but they have not invested in changing the hearts and minds, which have been infected by anti-Semitism, by religious leaders, by television, by political leaders, etc. So it doesn't go away unless one confronts it.
Now, as I read the study, and you tell me if I've got it right, the region that seems to have the highest level of anti-Semitism is Eastern Europe at 34%. Is that correct?
Well, after MENA, after the Middle East and North Africa, they're the highest. But what we would call the former Soviet Union, or today Eastern Europe, and again, I indicate here, ironically, the high level of support of Israel,
Yes.
as well as high levels of anti-Semitism. And that's big for a lot of reasons. History, has its impact. There was anti-Semitism before the Soviets, and then there was anti-Semitism with the Soviets. And so both of them have had a huge imprint on Hungary, on Poland, on Ukraine, etc. And not enough years have passed to uneducate this bigotry. So, we see it. We see it. And ironically, because of self-interest, their relationship with Israel lead to joint efforts, respect, and like, etc. But on the classic anti-Semitic stereotypes, they have not been dealt with and need to be dealt with.
All right, talk to me about another dimension of the study. Only 54% of people are even aware of the Holocaust, and 37% believe this whole idea of a mass genocide is a Jewish myth. Comment on what that means to you.
Well, to me, that's good news. When you consider, it's been 70 years, when you consider the tsunami of information and data and misinformation that's out there, to be able to come and say today 54% of the adult world knows what the Holocaust is, to me, is a positive sign. The negative is that 32 or 33% of those who know believe that it's either a myth or it's been exaggerated by the Jews in history. But, again, you're talking about the whole world.
Yes.
You're also talking about countries where, look at Iran, where Holocaust denial is part and parcel of their national identity. Certainly in the Arab Muslim world, they know about the Shoah, or they know the negative about it. So, again, and as time goes on and we move further away, it's going to get worse and worse. The question also is, does awareness of the Shoah impact on how you feel about Jews? And the answer is yes and no. It depends. And when you think about it, where it comes from, in Eastern Europe, where the Jewish blood is still in the ground, and Jews have not even come to burial, but to say that and they see, I guess, in these countries, they see Jews coming and visiting cemeteries or former cemeteries. And I guess on one hand it's tourism, on the other hand it annoys them that Jews are still, so much concerned with the Shoah, the Holocaust, and those memories.
Yes. Well, one of the things that we read all the time in the news, see it on Shalom TV, is the extent to which there has been this explosion of anti-Semitism even in Western Europe. And we're talking now about France, we're talking about England, we're talking about the fact that there are many French Jews who try to hide the fact that they're Jewish now. Many French Jews are buying apartments in Israel and are planning to leave because it's gotten so bad for them there. I'm reading your study, and the index score of France is 37%. Can you comment in general about the anti-Semitism that you have reported on outside this study in England, in France, and in Western Europe as a whole, and how you think it plays into this overall study?
Well, again, you have to be careful. The UK is low. The UK is 8-9%. Scandinavian countries are low, even though the level of anti-Israel activity is high. So you have a situation in Sweden where Jews are voting with their feet. You have a situation, so even though anti-Semitism there is low, they don't feel comfortable, they don't feel safe, they don't see a future, and so even, numbers themselves do not, the polling does not reflect the street. The polling does not necessarily reflect safety, the security, the violence, the intimidation, and so, in Great Britain, where the statistic is low, yet the anti-Israel quotient is high, and there have been serious incidents. In France, and ironically, France, for many years denied that there was anti-Semitism.
Yes.
In the last 10 years or so, it moved away from denial, and it began to confront anti-Semitism, by providing safety and security measures for Jews and Jewish institutions, and also they developed a task force, almost a model of how a country should respond, by a task force of the Ministry of Justice, Education, Interior, and there's a quick response. And yet, there are laws in France against Holocaust denial, against racism, against group libel, and yet the anti-Semitism continues and persists. In the year 2000, 2001, when we saw an explosion of anti-Semitism in Europe, the debate started: is this old anti-Semitism or new? Is it, is it Israel related? And the answer is yes. It's both, old and it's new. But what we are seeing in Europe today is a populist, nationalist, neo-fascist, anti-immigrant political expression. There's an election coming up in less than 10 days in Europe, at the European Union in Brussels. And these are parties from Bulgaria to Hungary to, wherever there's an EU.
Yes.
These are countries opposed to Europe.
Yes.
They are super nationalists. Many of them have anti-Semitism on their agenda. Greece, etc., Italy. And the fear is that they've come together. So while they're super nationalists and they're against immigrants, they're also against Jews. They're against Muslims. That they may capture 20% of the European Parliament. Now, individually, again, they're an insult to the democracy of each country. But if they can manifest a European unity of bigots, it would pose a greater threat to the safety and security of Jews and other minorities.
Okay, and you've now anticipated really the question that this entire study leads up to, because there are going to be people who are going to hear about the study, read the study, and they'll be asking one overriding question: what does it mean to me personally? To what extent should I, a Jew living in America, who also cares profoundly about A, the state of Israel, and B, Jews no matter where they live, everywhere in the world, we're all one family. To what extent should Jews in America now feel, Abe, some sense of unease, if not a sense of threat, if not for themselves, for family members, whether they be in Israel or Western Europe, Eastern Europe? To what extent does this trigger in your mind an appropriate reaction of fear among American Jews?
Well, fear is probably too strong a word. Look, America is unlike any other country, and we see it in the statistics, et cetera. Having said that, we're not immune. So Kansas City is part of our experience. Upstate New York is part. So everything is fine, and the statistics look good, and yet you wake up in the morning with ugly, vicious, even deadly anti-Semitism. So we know it's there. So I don't think Jews in America live with fear about anti-Semitism. I don't think Jews in America worry about going to synagogue because this is Jewish institutions, but at the same time we know that many synagogues have security today. That's a change from 20 years ago.
Yes.
So while the level in opinion polls are down, there's enough concern and anxiety in a changing world. But we also live in a world that you can't go into major corporations, you can't go into any media, newspaper, etc., without security. So security has become part of America's life, but even more so a part of Jewish life. So I think one needs to be smart, one needs to be vigilant, but I think it's a question of fear. In Europe, you have a different situation.
Yes.
A poll recently taken by the EU of Jews indicates that 30 to 40% are planning emigration. Indicates that 30 or more percent don't want to be identified publicly. So you don't wear a kippah on the street. You wear a baseball hat. You don't want to be identified. That's something to be worried about. When in synagogues in Europe today, part of the synagogue ritual is security. What happens if, what doors do you use? And I believe that the sinister thing is how many Jews have decided not to send their kids for Jewish education for fear. Mm-hmm. How many Jews have decided maybe I'll skip services because of fear? It's not only hiding your Magen David. It's not only substituting, a baseball hat for a kippah. It begins to undermine their freedom to be Jewish. I don't think that's in the U.S. I don't see it down the road. Although, again, I think we live in a different environment today than we've ever lived before, and so we should be aware. I think we should worry about, European Jews are saying they are worried.
Yes.
European Jews are looking for alternatives. They need to know that they are not alone.
Yes.
So I don't want to predict where, but we know there are places that Jews are of Hinduship Islam, where they're not that secure. So we need to be aware. If God forbid tomorrow, we need to worry about getting them out or providing for their safety, etc., will be there. I think this survey just raises the level of awareness.
Exactly.
Raises the level of concern and says, hey, it's serious. And it goes beyond anecdotes. And I think I'm thankful to Leonard Stern, who came to us and said, I want to do this, and it's relatively expensive because what it does for the Jewish community is it takes anti-Semitism today out of the realm of anecdote and stories and maisalach. Oh, I read that something happened.
Exactly.
It's not an exact science, but it's as close to an exact science as you can get, which says, 1 out of 4 adults in this world today are infected with anti-Semitism. That's a very resounding, sobering, but it's also a weapon in our hands, whether it's international organizations, whether it's to a government, whether it's to media, whether it's to religious groups, say, this is serious, you have a responsibility to see it seriously and to stand up.
Abe Foxman, you've done fabulous work for the Jewish community for years and years and years and years. This ADL study is a major piece of defending the state of Israel. I thank you, the state of Israel, the Jewish people everywhere. I thank you for giving us some time and for always being there to be part of the Jewish people in a very wonderful way. Thank you, my friend.
Mark, thank you for being there.
Be well. We'll talk soon. The thoughts of Abe Foxman, National Director of the ADL. And this study has implications for Jewish life, which many in the Jewish community will now be analyzing for months to come. My thanks to Sloan Copeland, Serge Goldberg, Carol Lilienthal, and Alan Orich for this edition of In the News. Until the next time, I'm Mark Golub. Be well, my friends.